All right, awesome. So why did you choose to work in marketing? So I kind of fell into marketing. Like I majored in advertising. I kind of wanted to go into like advertising, account management, account strategy. But then, I graduated from college. I ended up traveling to South America, and I kind of learned about like digital nomad, remote marketing work. And I kind of searched around and fell into it and really liked it. And I think, what I liked about advertising, about being able to kind of craft the narrative and connect with, consumers, like I found that like, doing marketing specifically at startups and tech companies, like you can do that, but in a much more hands-on way and really impact the growth of a company. And so that's kind of how I fell into marketing. And it's been a fun ride so far. Yeah.
Fantastic. I love the nomads. Like, you can work remote, you can sort of perfect fit, like, or a fit for you, like as you work as Demodesk as well. It's like really true, like this all remote enabling, like remote teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love this. And I envy you that you're so good with remote working, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of worked out. My previous role, I was remote for the past 6 years. And so when the pandemic hit, it was actually like probably easier for me because I was used to it. And it probably even leveled the playing field where I used to be the only remote person. And then all of a sudden everybody was remote. And I'm like, now you know what I feel like,
Exactly.
No, it definitely has its benefits and its drawbacks, right? I think working in an office, there's just synergy and connections there that you don't get online. So it's a trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Just quick follow-up on that because it's so interesting. Like, what are your like tips for marketeers or like generally like working remote, because you are like an expert and have been in this remote game forever and you're successful with? Like, do you have any things that's on top of head for that?
I mean, to be honest, I do think it takes a certain kind of personality. I know there are people who are just like itching to get back to the office. That being said, I mean, just like the standard advice, like have a routine, like, if you're working at 9 a.m., like try not to roll out of bed at 9 a.m. I know it's tough sometimes, but it's like, have that routine, have something to look forward to in the morning, whether it's like a cup of coffee, like by the window. I also think just like take time for breaks, like be flexible with yourself, like go take a walk, for lunch or whatever. And then when it comes to just like working, I think to make remote work really work, especially if you have people in an office, it's important for you to be connected. Like when you're online, like be connected, like respond promptly to Slack messages if you can. I know that's, people have a love-hate relationship with Slack, but like if you can like show that you're present even digitally, I think that adds a lot of trust to your team. Because the worst thing is when somebody's remote and you just don't hear from them. You don't actually know if they're like, working. And obviously, like you don't want to micromanage people. But if you can prove that like you're there, you're committed, you're engaged, that goes a long way. Yeah.
Love it. It's so true. I couldn't have said like put words on it, but that's true. Really, really cool. All right, let's move to the next question.
Awesome. So what's the best piece of advice about marketing you've ever received? A few things come to mind. And I do think that some of the best advice I've gotten about marketing is not from marketers, which I think is telling because a lot of times we're in our own world and it's actually like people outside of marketing who are actually receiving marketing messages who have the best insights. But yeah, I think one is that, don't take anything that anybody says as like gospel. So like, just because someone says, hey, you have to do it this way, like that may not be the case for your company, Like I've learned that like nothing is black and white. And so just because company X is really great with this strategy and it works for them, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And so take things with a grain of salt, and you always have to test yourself and see what works. Then another one that my former CEO always said, which is kind of funny, is that like, but it stuck with me, is that like, as a marketer, you always have to like taste the soup. So imagine you're like a chef, like you need to taste what you're like cooking before you serve it to customers, or, so same thing in marketing, right? Like, especially if you're leading a team, you have tons of strategies you're working on, tons of initiatives. It's easy to just kind of let things go, but it's super important to like take a step back, put yourself in the eyes of your customer, and like try going through your sign up workflow, try downloading an ebook, whatever, and be like, okay, does this wording make sense? Like, is it actually connecting with me? Does it actually work? Is it actually going to the right place in your like marketing automation system? Like, it's super important to test and double check, especially when it comes to copy, like double checking like the words in email or an ad, because mistakes happen. I've definitely sent out emails with typos in the subject line to like 40,000 people. Like I know not to make that mistake anymore. So it's really important to double check and like I said, taste the soup. Yeah.
I love this, tasting the soup, eating your own meatballs, drink your own champagne,
Exactly.
playing the secret shopper. I love it, and I promise you, you can feel the difference, like from a marketing campaign that has been walked through by yourself, and yeah, something that has not been done by that. I appreciate that. Great, thanks, great advice.
Yeah.
Also a bit surprised.
And I think like changing
Go.
I think changing your mindset too. Like if you review something as a marketer, you're going to look at it differently than if you try to put yourself in the shoes of your customer, right? So like for us, I'd be like, okay, I'm a VP of sales. I'm leading a sales team. These are a few pain points I'm struggling with constantly. Like, does this message resonate with me? And that's probably going to be a different result than if I'm reading it as James, the marketer. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Let's move on to the next. This is a bit the segment like that all the SDRs want to hear, and how to prospect a VP like you.
So the craftiest way I've been prospected, I really think it comes down to talking about like personalizing a message to my interests. So one example that comes up is, I think on my Twitter, I think it says I'm like a Twins fan. I'm a big Twins fan. It's a baseball team in the US. We're having a horrible season, like just terrible. But anyway, I love the Twins. I follow them. And so, I remember like an SDR once reached out and he was like, hey, I saw you like the Twins, the ARL Central is looking pretty competitive this year. And like, just instinctively, I started responding. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, like, we're not doing so great this year. Like, but, the Indians are looking great, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just like jump in because it's something I want to talk about, right? So if somebody were to come to me right now and be like, hey, the Twins are having a rough season, it sounds like you might lose Nelson Cruz, I would be like, I know, he's our top hitter. What are we doing? Like, I would like just jump in, right? So I think finding, that's, very specific, but finding like something that someone cares about, even if it's not even related to your product, it's going to elicit like a response if the prospect cares about it. But you have to go that extra step, right? You're not going to get that from using like personalized tokens that you're like sending in bulk. It takes the extra step to actually personalize a message. But I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, love it. It's so true, right? If you hit the nerve, instant answer. I had the same way. I just, he spoke about this book, and I referenced a paragraph in the book. You like answer within the next 5 minutes. Like, and I love that you're pointing out the extra steps, right? It also takes a lot of courage to take the extra step and to do a little bit more research, maybe, draw it back. But I still think that, in that situation, the rep definitely also addressed the need that was somewhat like remotely interested to you, right? So like, even though he like hit the nerve, probably it was also something that, was some like what was in your on your blogs, even though you didn't knew about it or something. So
yeah. No, definitely, I agree. And I think like two things stand out there. One is like, it's definitely tempting to just like blast off messages through Outreach or Sales Loft or whatever you use. I get that, but your response rates are going to be pretty low. So even taking like a minute or two per outreach, that time adds up. I get that. We're all strapped for time, but I think if you check the data, your response rates increase dramatically to a point where it's worth it. And I think the second piece of that is just like, as a prospect, if somebody reaches out to me with something super personal, like I'm kind of like, okay, I respect that. Like I recognize that as better, and it makes me want to like reciprocate, be like, okay, you did your work. Like I'll maybe not hop on a call, but at least respond, and acknowledge it. So I think that's important.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Let's go to a very heated one, and I've been hearing a lot of stuff about it.
Gated content or not? Why? So I don't know why this is such a touchy subject. I mean, my response is I think the majority of content should not be gated. At the same time, though, I see people like I said, I don't think anything is black and white. I see people being like, all content should be ungated, and they're just going on their rant. And then I check their company website and they have a lot of gated content, you know? So, so there's definitely a disconnect between what people are saying and what they're actually doing. And I think there's a reason for that. I mean, yes, like content is one of the best ways for you to showcase your brand, introduce buyers to, you know, your company, to establish yourself as a thought leader. Like you should be very generous with that content. That being said, imagine like you put in months working on a huge research report where you got thousands of data points, maybe on like sales compensation or like the state of SaaS or whatever. And let's say you say, hey, we did this great report, like we got thousands of downloads, and your CEO is like, great, does the sales team have those? And you're like, oh no, we actually decided not to capture that information. Like they're gonna look at you kind of like you're an idiot. Like, I mean, that might be an extreme, but you know, I think as a marketer, it's important for us to get the most out of everything we're doing. And so there are times when there's a big opportunity to capture demand, to capture information. And if you're missing out on that, then, you know, you're missing out, you're leaving money on the table. But I think it's a mix, right? Like it's also our job to provide our customers and our prospects with a good experience. And so I don't want to be spamming people. And so I don't think every ebook should be gated. No, I think like, you know, a sophisticated marketing strategy is going to have content at different stages of the funnel. And I think like a lot of top and mid funnel content where you're just introducing yourself, introducing insights, that should not be gated. But then you have certain types of content where, like I said, you put a lot of time into it, a lot of research, and it's very valuable. And if somebody downloads that or looks at it, it's a pretty clear sign that they at least struggle with a pain point that your company is solving. Like you want that information. And if it's a really quality piece of content, I think people understand that, like, okay, I give you my email, then I get access to this. Like I see so many of those like big, huge reports with lots of data points. Like that's a classic example. Like I've never seen that for free. Like, of course, well, it's free, but you know, you need to give your email. Like, and I think we expect that. So in summary, I think the vast majority of content should be ungated. But there are some really like high valuable pieces that you should be gating just to get the most out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. That's a very well thought and like put together answer. A thing, you know, that Chris Walker was actually speaking about last week, and I think the snippets, you probably follow him as well, is that he was speaking about like determining fit, right? So you have the target account, and a lot of like marketeers right now and sales reps, they have to hunt this like target account list. So, and this was the next question, how would you like determine this fit and the like fit when they're actually ready to buy? And what he's been arguing is that you have to have the target account firmographically, but what you have to add right now on is this like level of intent, like whether it is you know, they have downloaded an ebook, or like you find something that can like give you this intent, this first party intent. This was the fit question. What is your take on like intent and fit, you know, determining the fit, so to say?
That's a great point. Yeah, Chris Walker has some great content. And I think just to take it a step back, I think he's someone where he doesn't have to gate any content because he has great videos. They're getting hundreds of thousands of views. So they're like swimming in inbounds. So I think with him, like that's one of those cases where what works for him isn't working for us right now because we don't have that kind of content. So good for him. I think that's the ideal way to do it. But for the rest of us folks, I think we do need to kind of try to capture some information. But anyway, to your question, I think, yeah, I agree. If someone downloads an ebook, that is not intent. And I don't think the sales team should reach out to somebody who downloads an ebook because it's, you know, they're going to be like, what? Like there's a disconnect. So yeah, I think like when it comes time to like passing a lead to sales, I think you need two key parts. Like one, like do they fit the ICP? So are they like, have we had success with these kind of companies, this type of role? That's really important, you know, everything from firmographics, demographics, psychographics, all that stuff, to be like, okay, this person is worth talking to as a buyer. And then the intent aspect is the other part, which might even be more important, right? And so obviously you have like hand raisers when somebody like requests a demo, or if they sign up for a free trial, but there's other ways to look at intent too, based on different pain points that people are essentially communicating that they're dealing with, you know? So for us, like that pass off moment, it comes down to a score. So like one of the first things I did at Demodesk was build a lead scoring framework where, when somebody hits a certain score, it automatically gets sent to our sales team and assigned to them. And I think the important thing there is to agree on that. And so like both sales and marketing need to agree on, okay, what's qualified and what's going to happen, and then just automate it. And of course, like I think it's important to follow up and make sure that it's working. Like I feel like every week or two, I'm updating our score when we sync up and go, okay, actually we're getting too many low quality leads through. So what are we missing? Or, hey, actually I checked, there's some qualified leads that didn't make it, right? So what are we missing there? So it's a combination of aligning on what you both agree on and then following up, checking to make sure it's working. And yeah, I think, it's a combination of ICP and intent. Yeah.
Yeah, great answer. I'm following everything because I just, had this, not epiphany, but it makes so much sense. And like that you speak about it, totally agree. Like you don't want to reach out to someone, download the white book. You nearly, you want to have this like ideal score. So yeah, I love that you, directly work with this project.
Yeah, and I think
Cool.
it's pretty important to have that score factor both, right? So nobody can hit our lead score threshold with just intent or just, matching our ICP. Like it needs to be a little bit of both. And like I said, if somebody's in our ICP and downloads an ebook, they're probably not going to hit that score, right? They need some sort of engagement, whether it's like visiting our website or something else, because otherwise it's just, the sales team's not going to have good success with that. And then I'm wasting their time,
Yeah. Makes sense. Like Chris, you spoke about, Chris Walker spoke about, like it's better to go from 0.1 conversion rate to 7.10 with less accounts, and then you can scale that instead of going like all out with no intent whatsoever. Maybe have this 1.0x conversion rate, but you have sprayed and prayed during the entire market, and your market is already, you run that through all the good accounts already. So
definitely. Yeah, being super targeted is very important. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of marketers, right? Like volume is also like, it's tempting, right? Like getting thousands of leads, but yeah, if they're not the right fit, it's just, you're wasting everybody's time.
Yeah. Because it's this like living in the intersection between quality and quantity, what's your approach towards that? Finding that perfect point where you say, like, I'm satisfied with the quantity, but I'm also hitting my quality criteria that I've been setting up. You said you do this in like weekly assessments together with the team, or
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a weekly sync with our VP of sales, also a weekly sync with our head of sales development, who really like owns kind of the inbounds going to the sales team. And so it really just comes down to like making sure that we're aligned, like literally asking, like, what do you care about? And so like, sometimes it's like, they'd actually rather talk to an account executive at a target company than a VP of sales at a company that's not in our ICP. So there are certain things that are more important than others. And as a marketer, you're not going to know that unless you actually ask your sales team. Because they're the ones who are actually deciding to engage with a lead, right? And they know that from their experience, from what's working with them. And so I think it's really important to ask those questions. And then once you have that information, build it into your score. So yeah, like I said, I think just like being in regular communication, I think everybody knows like marketing and sales alignment is super important, but you need to build it into your schedule, build it into your workflow. So like I said, whether it's a weekly sync, or even like an automated email or something where it gives you an opportunity to share feedback. Having those conversations is just crucial.
Yeah, love it. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Next question.
All right. What tools help you the most in your day-to-day? I mean, nothing super groundbreaking. Like we use, HubSpot, Salesforce. I think with that, the most important tool is like a really well-built dashboard. And that's something like we recently improved on our side, like, getting, a nice snapshot into like our overall marketing health, like our campaigns, how many leads, how many of those have converted into opportunities. Getting really good visibility into that is super helpful. And that kind of helps diagnose, like, are things going well? Are things going poorly? And then of course, like when you have those questions, you can dig deeper and, into what's going well, what's not going well. So I think like having built out dashboards are really important. Most of that's in Salesforce for us. But then, yeah, I think I've also used a combination of like Asana, Notion, like Trello, just to organize my own kind of to-do list, projects to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. So, nothing super groundbreaking, but, making sure you do have a list of priorities and make sure you're prioritizing what is the most important. So you can kind of focus on like what's the least amount of work with the most amount of impact. I think having some sort of system, even if it's like a notebook, honestly, like organizing priorities is super important. So those are probably the main things for me, honestly. Yeah, so like quality dashboards, so you can really see the health of what you're doing, and then your own kind of project management. Yeah.
Love it. You're sort of say the gentleman of tools, good dashboard, some project management tools, notebook. I'm happy.
I mean, yeah, whatever works. Like, honestly, if it's like a piece of paper on the wall that you're writing on, like, great. I don't think it needs to be a certain tool, just whatever works for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Cool. We are running past the time, but for me it's okay to continue if you want.
Yeah, I can too. Yeah,
fantastic.
Sorry, I'll be honest, I feel like the first set of questions were a little more interesting to me than the last set, so maybe perfect. The second set will be shorter.
Yeah, no worries, and that's perfect, right? Yeah. Like we have a lot of questions, we can speak about the stuff. So like for the second part, like if you say like which one were more interesting to you, then we just start with them, and I think we already got a lot of I got a lot of learnings already, so yeah.
I mean, I can probably speak to any of these if you want. Up to you. Yeah.
No, but you made some notes. Let me like what I find interesting. With the KPI goals, the marketing.
Yeah, I made notes on those too because those were like the toughest for me to respond to. So I wanted to make sure I had something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we can start with the last one. I think that's really interesting. So like considering that most of the marketing projects take time to get results, how do you convince your stakeholders to buy in?
It's a great question, and it's important. I mean, there's two things I'm thinking about. One is like remind your stakeholders of a typical buyer journey, right? So like, when's the last time you went to purchase a product? Like, what's because a sales rep reached out, or what's because you saw an ad? Probably not. You probably heard, from word of mouth, or you searched yourself. And so the typical buyer journey is usually a combination of those things. And so just understanding that, like, okay, most people are going to find us by searching us after they've heard about us through an ad, through a piece of content, whatever. I think so knowing that, I think, is a good place to start. And that does take time. With any new initiative, it does take time to see the residual results of those. But I think the big thing I would say is that you should establish in your marketing budget, like at least 10 to 20% is allocated towards experiments. And you should agree on that with your stakeholders so that if you say, hey, I'm going to, test this campaign, that they're not going to go, oh, wait, hold up. Like, as long as that's in kind of your discretionary 10 to 20% experimental budget, like there shouldn't be a lot of pushback there. But I think with that, it's really important to set up experiments correctly. And so first of all, build a plan so you know like what is involved in this experiment, who's owning what, set some realistic expectations on like, okay, what does success look like? Like if we hit this KPI or this number, like that means that it'll be a success, right? Then a realistic expectation on like, what do we actually expect to happen? Like, are we gonna hit that success goal, or like what happens if we're lower or higher? And then like a timeline, right? So maybe we're gonna run this experiment for 2 weeks, and then we're gonna assess and literally, I mean, like have a calendar invite scheduled for that 2 weeks. So I actually know, like, okay, we're gonna assess this campaign, that kind of thing. So setting the framework for it. And then of course, if you can just, be like, okay, we're doing a really small budget first to test. And then of course, if it works, then we'll increase, whatever it is, whether it's, investing a lot of time or money. I think if you can make a point where, it's a small investment now to test, and then later we'll invest more, that's usually a pretty easy sell to your stakeholders, especially if it's in the context of that, like, this is less than 20% of our budget. It's in the experimental budget. Like, we need to experiment in order to try new things, I think that's important to have that understanding.
Yeah, love it. I love this, set agreement that you say like an X amount of my budget is actually going through these experiments, like that's agreed upon already. And then it's like low friction for you. You can fail fast and then scale, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, marketers need some level of freedom to test things out, right? Because otherwise you're just gonna get stuck in your ways. And marketing's changing, right? I mean, like there's always new channels. Like for a while, like Instagram ads were so cheap and they worked so well for us. And then eventually they stopped working because it got more competitive. But like if you can identify those like low-hanging fruit channels when they're early, it's worth investing. But if you have a CEO who's not on board, like that's tough, right? So having that mutual understanding that like we need to test, we need to experiment, like the landscape's changing, it's really important. I mean, in my previous role, our CEO was like, hey, we should try TikTok ads. And I was like, great. Now, granted, TikTok ads were not a good fit for us, but I'm happy that he brought it up, right? Because it means that like, hey, let's at least try something. Let's at least check to see if this new platform is worth it. For most B2B companies, probably not. But I think it's good to have those conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Speed to innovation, right?
Exactly.
Speed, innovate. Cool. I think that was a great answer. This is a special one, and I like to ask you that because you have bought some software before. You are also trying to sell your software, but like if you would think about the ways you could improve the way you buy software, how and what would you change?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think a typical buyer process is you recognize you need a tool. You already have a few ideas of options out there. Maybe you talk to your network. Hey, you know, I'm looking at X tool versus Y tool. What are your thoughts? Obviously, it's like tough for early stage companies when people don't know who you are. And so that's our job, to get in front of those people, to establish ourselves as a brand, right? But in terms of like improving the buying process, I think, you know, when I've like looked at different tools to buy for marketing, like specifically like email marketing automation, like the best source to help me decide is literally like random blog posts of somebody who's like, hey, I compared, you know, Instapage and Unbounce. Here's what I think between the two of them. Or, hey, you know, ActiveCampaign versus MailChimp or whatever, you know. Like I think companies like G2 Crowd are doing a good job where, you know, you can compare software, and you can get the, you know, like quotes from people on like, you know, what they actually think of the software. But honestly, I do think that like finding like somebody who has tested both and just giving the raw like feedback, that's super helpful. And so I think if companies can kind of capitalize on that, it's tough though, right? Because when I see it, you know, at like company.com, like us versus them, like, you know, it's biased, right? So it's like, I don't know how valuable that is. So I think it really comes down to getting your own users to be ambassadors for yourself. And that's where you can get them to write reviews on, you know, places like G2 or Capterra or whatever. But if you can get them to like share on LinkedIn or whatever, like I'm using this tool and it's amazing. Like if you can turn your own customers into ambassadors, I think that is going to achieve kind of what I was describing, like you searching for tools and seeing people talking about, this is a great tool that I use. I think that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think like our RevOps has bought like tools based on Reddit, you know, Reddit conversations.
Definitely.
Because they are anonymous, they are super honest and frank. And it's exciting how, or fascinating how G2 nearly loses some of its like objectivity, because you know it's, you know, incentivized by the brand, even though it's objective, right? So I don't know how about your take, but like, of course you want to read like a review on that, but you also know that, you know, they bought the premium package, you know, of course they, you know, have like a lot. I don't know. What's your take on that? I sometimes can feel that, like, yes, of course, you know, of course they're going to give you a 5-star review, like they got a voucher for it, right? While to go to Reddit, they have no incentive whatsoever. But you get the honest and pure and raw opinion and make that buying decision based on that.
No, definitely. I mean, yeah, I myself have gotten a lot of gift cards for reviews and a lot of them have been 5-star reviews. But granted, I normally only review products that I like. So I think you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I do think review platforms are helpful. But I think you have to dig through the reviews and look for like the 3-star reviews, you know? and look for like real comments on what people liked and didn't like, right? So I kind of ignore like the 5-star reviews and the 1-star reviews. It's like, those are usually like, maybe somebody like a 1-star review, often somebody was like emotional and annoyed, but is that really how they feel? Probably not. 5-star reviews, it's probably just because they want to get their gift card. But yeah, if you look at those like 2 to 4-star reviews, that's where you can really gain insight into like, okay, like what do people like? What do they not like? What are the drawbacks? And that gives you a better, way to actually compare like software, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
A great answer. Same for me. You always click on the 3, like, oh, what does 3 say? Because that's interesting. Cool. We spoke a bit about this before, and again our other call. But what do you prefer, marketing sourced revenue or marketing influenced revenue as your primary KPI?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd all love it to be just 100% marketing sourced revenue, right? In an ideal world, marketing is just crushing it. Have this amazing brand. When people, know that they need the software for X topic, like they know to come to us, that kind of thing, right? Like in an ideal world, that is how it's working. But it doesn't work that way. Like I said, a lot of early stage companies don't have that brand yet. They don't have that recognition. So they need to, they're swimming upstream a bit. And so I do think there are some cool opportunities to, partner with sales on like marketing influenced revenue. For example, like, our sales team, like reaches out to, a target list of companies. And so like, we will try to hit those people up with advertising, beforehand, so that, when the sales rep reaches out, like they've seen our logo, that kind of thing. So I think that things like that are kind of cool to collaborate on. But yeah, in an ideal world, you're just flooded with inbounds, and the sales team, all you have to do is respond to inbounds, that's the ideal situation. Obviously it doesn't
take
happen.
out the non-fits. No, only pick the golden nuggets.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, in the meantime, I think it's really important for marketing and sales to collaborate. And at the end of the day, I don't really care who gets the credit. Like, yes, I want to be able to look at my marketing campaigns and say, yes, this had an impact on ROI. And that's why we build dashboards for it. So we can track, through the sales funnel. But at the same time, if I know that what I'm doing is helping close deals, even if sales gets credit, like I'm okay with that. Like we're in this together, like we're not competing against each other. We're teammates.
Yeah. The revenue team in itself makes sense.
Exactly.
whatever you call it. Makes so much sense. Last one for me, then you can pick one, or we say goodbye, or we speak about something else that you feel we missed out. Like the top 3, the pitfalls, the challenges for demand gen for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot I could say. I do think that one pitfall with early stage demand gen teams is focusing too much on top of the funnel. Like you see, things like, oh, the MQL is dead. And like, I get that. I agree with that to a point, right? Like if all you're looking at is like leads and MQLs, like you really don't know if you're influencing like revenue, so you need visibility into the entire funnel. And so, like I said, that's why I like recently built a better dashboard so that we can track, pipeline, closed deals, like inbound versus outbound, so we know that like specific campaigns are driving revenue. I think that's one really important thing. Just so don't just focus on top of the funnel. You need visibility into the entire revenue funnel. And yeah, I think like a second one is just, make sure you have good reporting. And, it's obviously very similar, but, I do hear people say things, okay, not all marketing activities have to be measured. Well, kind of, but I think everything needs its own set of measurement, right? So like if you're doing kind of more top of the funnel, like brand awareness stuff, like maybe your metric is impressions, like on social, or engagement, right? Yeah, it's not turning into leads. Like specifically, it's tough to track that, but at least you can track like something top of the funnel. And so that's important. So like, I think every single marketing activity needs some sort of metric that you can measure. Otherwise, you're just like throwing stuff at a dartboard and you're not even seeing where it lands, like, and that's not going to help you scale, because you need to be able to decide, like, is this working or not? And sometimes you can based on like feedback. So somebody inbound and says, yeah, I saw a video like that you published. Great. That's great. That's good to hear, but having those metrics like impressions or whatever, even for top of the funnel stuff, is super important. Obviously, for really targeted campaigns, your metrics should be focused on revenue. Yeah. And Yeah, I think another
That's
pitfall is just like, and this is kind of just more like general marketing, but like really like checking your work. You know, at high growth, like really fast teams, it's easy to try to you know, optimize like shipping something new as opposed to perfecting it, and it is a balance, right? Like I probably opt more on the side of like publishing something than like making it perfect, just because I know that we're limited for time. But you know, I have seen so many emails get sent where there's like, you know, the tag where it says like, hey, how are things at company name? You know, like you need to check that, you need to test that, you know, like when you're doing things at scale, reaching thousands of people, like you can't afford to make those mistakes. And so, you know, I think building a culture on your team where you're double checking, triple checking, pinging your coworker, hey, can you check this for me? Hey, can you proofread this? That kind of thing. I think that's super important, because, you know, like as marketers, like we're brand ambassadors, like in the sense that like what we're doing is getting visibility into potential customers. And so we need to be really careful with what we're sending out. Otherwise, if, you know, any poor, any like negative thing is going to reflect poorly on the brand. So I think it's really important to establish that culture of like double checking, triple checking, but also balancing like shipping things fast. It's a tough balance, but I think it's worth investing in. Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Last one for me.
Okay.
How do you make sure that you're scaling sustainable?
Scaling sustainably.
Hmm?
It's a good question. I mean, yeah, I think it comes down to, I mean, I think you need to look at just like your overall spend. Let me take a sec here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a question that I finished wondering. We're like, we all on this high growth, but how do we make it like sustainably? How can we scale, you know, in your marketing department and your marketing growth? How can we scale sustainably? And for me personally, it comes back to having the right people at the right position in the right bus, because then you know you have a foundation, and then try to emulate these processes that you then can scale, right? Doesn't really matter if like you, James, are the greatest marketer in the world, but if you cannot translate this towards your team in the way you report, the way you message, then it's hard. So yeah, just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
that I wanted like to get your opinion on that whilst we're on this like topic of pitfalls. Yeah.
That's a great point. So yeah, I think like to ensure you're scaling efficiently, I think there's a few things, right? Like when it comes to, you know, marketing and sales, like making sure your spend is under control and that it's actually providing results. And so, you know, obviously early stage teams, just building a sales team, there's going to be a lot of burn. Like that's obvious, right? But you need to get to a point where, you know, there's at least like revenue coming in. And maybe you're not profitable, but, you know, you can see like a road to that. And so, for example, like all your marketing spend, there needs to be some sort of result there that impacts revenue. That may sound obvious, but you also see a lot of companies just blowing money, and it's like, you know, if you're not actually tracking if it's impacting revenue, it's like that could just be wasted money, right? So that's one thing, like making sure that like what you are doing actually is yielding like ROI. And I think with that, like you need really good tracking and testing. And, you know, like even if you have a big budget, like spend small first to see what works and then scale it up. You know, don't just blow $100,000 on something on a whim, because you can't really know if that's going to work or not. But then, yeah, I think the hiring aspect is really important too. I think you want to hire people that are a good fit in the moment, but also somebody who can scale with you, you know? So if we hire somebody maybe to run like demand gen, and they're good now, but we know that like once we hit our Series B and we need to scale, you know, to X budget, like they're probably not going to be qualified for that. If we think we're close to that benchmark as a company, then that's not a good hire, because we want to hire somebody who we're going to have to, you know, either hire over soon or let go, like, right? Like that's not good for them. It's not good for the company. And so I think it's really important to, you know, assess like where you are in who you hire, like make sure that they can scale with you, that there's a path for them to that next role. Because we spend so much time on training in onboarding. It's, you know, it's unfortunate when hires don't work out, but if you can avoid that, that saves you a lot of time. And then, you know, you're helping people out in their career as well, giving them a path to their goals. So I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This was more on the personal side and so forth, but I had to ask it to you while we had
Yeah, I don't know. I
opportunity.
mean, that's, to be honest, that's, yeah, it's a tough question. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Great, James. This was perfect. So much insight. Thank you so much for taking your time. Is there any like any topic that we didn't like cover, or where you think like I would have liked to set that or speak about that? Or
no, I don't think so. I mean, like,
yeah,
the one thing we didn't really touch on was like, how do you make sure your return on marketing campaigns align with KPIs? But like, I talked about dashboards and tracking, so I think we covered that.
Yeah,
so
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No, this is cool. This is fun.
Yeah, you did great, man.
You did great. I appreciate you reaching out. Yeah.